Mom, can I get a motorbike? You're never bringing a motorbike to this house. Okay, Mum. In the UK, from the age of 16, you used to be able to ride any two-wheeled vehicle under 250cc on L plates as a learner rider. As far as my mum was concerned, full-size motorbikes were the spawn of the devil and would never be allowed at our home. Smaller bikes and scooters, for some irrational reason, were grudgingly permissible. My dad? He just kept quiet. Despite Mum's antipathy, my teenage years were filled with motorized two-wheelers. I have a grainy picture of my brother Tim and me sitting on his Lambretta GT200 from long before I ever had a bike of my own. I'm all teeth and cheeks, while Tim, the impossibly cool older brother, looks like a slim white version of James Brown. I don't think he ever actually deigned to take me for a ride on that scooter, and my mother certainly wouldn't have allowed it. But the hook had been dangled and set. Almost as soon as I turned 16, I was able to pry his other bike from him with the proceeds from my morning paper round. It was a worn-out Lambretta D150, one of the early Ds, with no body panels to speak of, a 3-speed gearbox, and a clutch like a light switch. I must have stalled that thing about 40 times before I finally got the hang of the relationship between the clutch and the throttle, and was able to weave my way from our driveway and out onto the public roads. Even now, almost 50 years later, I can still remember riding one of those high, open roads across the top of the Cotswolds, the two-stroke motor humming away beneath me, the wind in my face and the view stretching out for miles in all directions. Speed wasn't important to me, which was probably a good thing because I think flat out that D was only good for about 45 miles an hour. But it introduced me to the world of powered two-wheel transportation and the exotic dream that with a little fuel in the tank you could head for the horizon. I have no idea what happened to the D. From time to time it was soft seas, so perhaps it finally locked up for good. It's more likely, though, that it was swapped for some other bottom-of-the-barrel bike, as I had a whole succession of small scooters in those early days. Gradually, the scooters were replaced by small motorbikes. My first, a BSA C15, was allowed a place in the parental garage since it was my only way to get to and from my job in the production control office at the ailing BSA factory in Small Heath, and it was a small bike. Although C15s have a reputation for being fragile, mine behaved flawlessly, never failing to start and always getting me where I wanted to go. But as reliable and useful as the C15 continued to be, my mind had already been drifting towards larger and more powerful bikes. I took my riding test on the BSA in the pouring rain. In those days, you just rode around a predetermined route while the examiner watched you from the side of the road. One of the key elements of the test was the emergency stop. The examiner would step out into the road holding his clipboard, and your job was to come to a quick, controlled stop without falling off or ploughing into him. When I saw him step out in front of me, I braked hard, but my rear wheel slid out sideways on the wet, greasy, diesel-soaked road. I stopped within inches to spare, with the rear wheel almost level with the front. I was sure I must have failed the test, but instead of being upset, the examiner passed me my ticket and congratulated me on managing to keep the bike under control in difficult circumstances. Now I could legally ride any size motorbike. Mom, I just passed my motorbike test. You are never bringing a motorbike to this house. I'd anticipated this. Unbeknownst to my parents, I already had a big motorbike. A few weeks earlier I'd bought a 600cc 1950 Panther Redwing 100 from a former girlfriend's brother for the princely sum of £10, and rented a small lock-up garage and had secretly been working on it while my parents thought I was out hanging around with my friends. When I bought it, it was in original condition. All the tinware was in place and everything worked as it should. I can even remember the license plate number, PTW116, if anyone knows of its whereabouts. Even through my rose-tinted bifocals, I'll admit it was a bit of a beast. It had square tires from an earlier life hauling a sidecar, which made its inherently precarious handling verge on the mutinous. It shook, it roared, it often stalled, and it tried its best to break my ankle whenever I got lazy and didn't adjust the advance retard just so before trying to kick it into life. But I loved it. I loved the lazy, loping way its long-stroke engine pulled like an express, no matter which gear you were in. I loved the look of that massive, black, sloping iron cylinder reaching towards the headstock from what seemed like a single block of aluminum at the bottom end. And I adored the gratuitously fat double exhaust pipes emerging from its twin-port head. And most of all, being 16, remember, I loved the way you could make it bark and backfire by suddenly retarding the ignition. My friend John and I butchered it. We stripped off everything we considered old-fashioned or unnecessary, including the toolbox and the original steel mudguards, bolted on a dual seat and a homemade sissy bar, then headed up the M6 to Scotland. I told my parents we were going to Scotland. I certainly didn't tell them how. For more of this story, and my many other motorcycle audiobooks, please search for Nick Adams Motorcycle on Audible and Amazon. Thanks for listening.